Today's episode of What's on Your Bookshelf is brought to you by Insignia Training Partners, the leaders in outsourced L&D talent and resources. Insignia is a full-service learning and development company that provides L&D talent to design, develop, and deploy your training solutions. Insignia specializes in providing the right resources for your projects at a fraction of the cost as opposed to bringing on new full-time employees. This includes fractional Chief Learning Officer services for enterprise training strategy, instructional designers to develop your training content and materials, facilitators to deliver in-person or virtual training to your staff, LMS administrators to manage the process, virtual training producers to make sure your virtual training is engaging and effective, and coaches to support the learning after training is completed. If you don't have a training department, that's okay. Insignia can be your bolt-on training department. With Insignia, you get dedicated resources providing fractional services by specialists in their field. Whether it's onboarding new hires, upskilling your team, or ensuring compliance, Insignia designs impactful programs that stick. Visit insigniatraining.com to discover their full range of services and to schedule a free consultation. Insignia is your partner for training success.
Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we are living out loud the pages of the books on our bookshelves. The book we took off of our shelf that we're reading is The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. My name is Denise Russo. I'm here today again with my friend and co-host Sam Powell, and we've been exploring this book that is structured in such a way that there's a project to consider every single month of the year. And today we're up to August. And the goal for us with this book is we're doing this multi-episode series to get to the end of the year and the end of the book so that you could construct your own happiness project at the top of the year. Sam, great to be here with you today.
So good to be here with you. It's funny, as we're getting through this, I just kept thinking about the order of these happiness books that we've been doing. And what I'm enjoying about this one is it's like the application of the last two that we've read, right? Like the last two, like the first one was all the research, all the like, what makes you happy? What are things that you could be doing, right? So it was kind of like this theoretical, here's a bunch of options for you. The last one was like one guy's take on, again, like the theory of happiness and what really could make you happy and, how, and again, some things to think about, some things to accept, some things to reject, some things to do. But this is one person's practical application, right? It's the story of her doing this and living this out loud, right? Living her research out loud. And I love the way this has come together because I loved the way the first two really work together as far as like, what does make you happy? What are the things you need to think about? What are the things you need to be, really considering and doing? And then just this journey of watching somebody else do it, right? And like going through her project, like I wouldn't do all that. Like my resolutions wouldn't be her resolutions, but it's just so nice thinking about what she's doing and thinking about how I could make my own happiness project, come new year, right? Like, what are the things I would want to focus on? And it kind of gives you like a structure, which I think is fun, right? Like I love a good template that helps you, kind of do this on your own. And so like, I've just really it hit me as I was reading like the end of the book and, preparing and then re-looking at some of my highlights for this chapter is like, this is such a like neat thing for people to really think about doing because it takes this into action, right? It takes you into how do you do it? What does it look like if someone were to apply all the things we've learned? And like, that's what she's doing. And we keep coming across things that she's like, oh, we learned from research. And it's like, oh, I remember that from, the research we read and the books we read previously. So it's just, I don't know. It's just, again, like the way this has all fallen and the way this has come together, which we had a bit of a strategy, but we didn't really know. So I like that really hit me this week for some reason.
I love that. I would think it's serendipitous because I was thinking earlier this week, looking back at all the episodes we've done since the beginning, and we didn't know when we started where we would be today. But now that we look back, everything has absolutely perfectly aligned up. The way even Ikigai led itself into John Wooden, which led itself to James Clear, which led itself to this year. And I can't wait. We probably have, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 more episodes before we reveal what we're doing next year. And I'm excited about next year as well. And just to give you all a little hint preview, we actually know what we're going to do next year, and at least part of, if not all of, the year after that.
Yeah. Super excited. I'm looking at half of the books for the upcoming year, and I'm like, oh, I just can't wait to finish these ones we're on to get to the next ones. And such an exciting, like, it's just, the journey's been super fun. And, I really, really enjoy that. And, as she moves into August, we came from the money chapter, right? Like of, focusing on what could you do with money to up your happiness. And then I love the way she, kind of started. I love the way she started this chapter with this sort of like, all right, I'm done with the money part of it. Like, it was nice. And like, I'm convinced there are things you can do with money, but like, I just need to step outside of that, like, worldly thought process. And I think we do this, right? When we work on something, we're like, oh, we're going to work in this area. And then it's like, oh God, I'm exhausted in this area. So I need the palate cleanser, the opposite of that. So to go from money to contemplating the heavens and eternity is an interesting shift, but I also think kind of a weirdly natural shift.
Yes. She's on this journey to elevate her happiness. But the question is, why? Like, does it even really matter? I was reading this post this morning that was on LinkedIn, and this poor guy named Joe, I don't know him. He's like a third connection, so not even close, but somehow, remember yesterday, maybe we were talking about what is it that people get a tipping point for? Like, what is it that tips their posts into becoming viral? Well, this guy was talking about how he's just mentally wrecked. He lost his job. I like to say that you don't lose your job loses you. Okay. It's just that they make a business decision, and it's a decision that's about their business, and you are a human that lives in the business. So in any case, his post was all about how, we just don't talk about these things, and we should stay better connected and be able to be authentic. And there were hundreds of comments in there about agreeing or disagreeing about using LinkedIn as a place to share your real thoughts around things. Mm-hmm. But what I noticed about it, Sam, was there were 2,800 by now, maybe even more, likes, loves, whatevers. I wish there were unlike choices on certain posts because I felt bad for him. But the point of this post and the point of this chapter is that we don't have infinite amounts of time, but we have a choice with what we do with the time that we do have. And it got me thinking about some of the people I'm working with lately who either hate their situation, they have a mismatch with their manager, they feel stuck or stressed out or burnt out, or there's somebody whose job displaced them and they just feel like they're in this sea of the unknown and not sure where to go and what to do. And so when I was thinking about how she moved from money into this, it's almost as if she had to elevate her thinking from the things that we short term need to have for our personal gains or for those quick things that we think make us happy. And you remember it was early on in Dr. Sonja Lyubomirsky's book where she said, money doesn't buy you happiness.
Right.
And so if she's exploring how to elevate her happiness, but she's thinking beyond her life in this earth, I just thought that was quite something for her to contemplate it. But then she starts by talking about reading stories about catastrophe. And so it almost went in a weird turn for not the eternity that we think of as this beautiful heavenly place, but she was talking about thinking about catastrophes.
I loved this little tidbit she says as she gets into this, where it's a conversation with her husband, and she's like, when I mentioned to my husband I was going to focus on eternity, he looks at her suspiciously and says, "You're not going to engage in a lot of morbid activities, are you?" And I laughed out loud because I could totally see my husband doing this, because I'm like, oh, I'm reading about this or this, and he's like, you're not going to become some weird like hippie, are you?
Yeah.
It's like, I was like, no. But their whole conversation was hilarious because he asked that question of, you're not going to engage in a lot of morbid activities. And her internal thought was, that sounds interesting. interesting, which again is like totally something I would do where I'm like, ooh, this could be a good idea.
It was
And
kind
then
of funny because she even said to him, I promise you I won't put any skulls on the coffee table.
yeah, exactly. Like I just giggled about that because, sometimes when we're working on our own personal growth,
Yeah.
the path we go down makes sense to us, right? And it's not us going off on some insane tangent. It's just a tangent to help us expand our thinking, expand our perspective. But
Yeah.
to someone who's not sitting on the journey with you, like who's not you in the driver's seat of the journey, it does sometimes
Yes.
look a little crazy. And I just giggled at that because I'm like, I could 100% see me and my husband having that exact conversation.
Yes, exactly. Well, she says she had this memento mori, reading memoirs about people facing death. And I remember reading a book. It was called The Last Lecture. I'd have to look up who wrote it. But Scott, how about we put a link in the show notes for our friends? It's a really small and short read, but it's basically the story about a guy who found out that he was terminal. And so he started journaling and writing out what he wanted this last part of his life to look like. And even though you could think of this as a morbid time for him, he looked at it through a happiness lens, if you will, and he ended up having what he felt like was the most rewarding time of his life. And it actually makes me think about this other lady that I used to work with in our former job. Well, my job that I had before I met you. So the same company, but a different part of the company. And she was a very successful senior executive level person. And at some point along her journey, her father became very ill and needed a full-time caretaker. And so she and her sister decided that they were going to have to make a really hard decision to change their life. Like, here's a lady who spent 50, 60, 70 hours a week invested in her ladder climbing career, if you will. And she wanted to get off the ladder because what was most important was her family and her father in this case. And so she actually kind of journaled this in her LinkedIn profile for the year that she spent with her dad. She took him to his bucket list items. Not every day was great because he was also ill, but she got to experience time with him that was maybe the first time since she was a little girl that she was able to spend with him. And there's just something about the thought that if you knew that today was your last day, what would you do? In fact, there's a really great song about that. I can't remember if Matthew West is the singer. I'd have to look it up. But basically, the lyrics say something like, if today was your last day, how would you live it? And we don't know. It could be both of our last day.
Yeah. And she says that as she was reading these books and as she's contemplating, right? Because she read, a lot of memoirs about people who, right, found out they had terminal illnesses or were moving through grief because they lost someone, or, just all these things that were like, they're these big moment, like life shifting type of things. But she said that everyday life seems so permanent and unshakable. But as I was reminded by these writers, it can be destroyed by a single phone call, right? It's the phone call that changes everything. It's the, piece of news that changes everything. And, there is, I think, something to that contemplation of, and she has a quote by Buddha in here that also says, of all the mindfulness meditations, that on death is supreme, right? Like the contemplating the end of your life, contemplating your death, contemplating what would it be if this was the last day of your life, like you're saying, right? That is the ultimate meditation, the ultimate mindfulness type of a thought process, right? Because if you were to live with that thought in mind, how would you behave differently? What would that really look like for you? And it made me think of Simon Sinek's Infinite Game. Is what, I love Simon Sinek's work, but in a finite game, the point of the game is to win, right? You've got a goal, you're trying to accomplish it, you're trying to win. In an infinite game, the point of the game is to stay in the game, is to play forever. And one of the things he says in his dialogue about that thought process is that people who are concerned with an infinite game rather than a finite game, like thinking about your career, thinking about business, especially, right, your life, are far more concerned with their legacy than with, what's happening right now. And I think about this is like the same thing. If you're thinking about your death, if you're thinking about the legacy that you'll leave behind, what would you do differently in this day, in this week, in this moment, right? I was listening to a podcast from a coach and she was saying the same thing. It was like just this week too. So this all kind of came together for me in the last couple of days. But she was just talking about, like it's a profitable coach podcast where it's like she's, running a business, all that sort of good stuff. But she said, what she's most concerned with, isn't necessarily purpose, but I think it really comes down to that is what's the legacy she's leaving for her great grandkids, right? What are the words she's writing down? What are the things that she's putting out there in the world that can benefit people she'll never meet, right? She'll never know. And it's this concern with legacy. It's this concern for when I'm gone, when the end is here, if this was my last day, what would I do? And I think that there's something so spiritual in that thought process and in that, meditative exploration.
I think so too. One of my favorite John Maxwell quotes says, once you have tasted significance, success no longer satisfies. And what it basically means is that you go to school for all those years so that you can get a good job and a career, and then you get the job and you climb a ladder. And for many, many thousands of people, the ladder fell off the building in the last 2 years. People were displaced from their jobs and feeling lost because they were caught up in the title of what they did, not who they were. And there's a lot of people struggling with that. If you're listening to this podcast and that's your story, reach out to us at least for an initial complimentary discovery call, because coaching can help. These books help. I can say with absolute 100% confidence and certainty and conviction that when Sam and I set out on this adventure, yes, it was that we already both loved personal growth and self-development and leadership development, business development for ourselves. But we felt strongly that if these things could change us, why would we hold it to ourselves and not share it with other people? And I'm so grateful for it, which is probably a good segue to where she goes in the book, is that she talks about keeping a gratitude notebook. But right before she did that, she said something that I know that you do, Sam, which is she was talking about this concept of what if you just every day only wrote one sentence? And it got me thinking about the journal that you have.
Yeah, which is her complimentary journal to this. I think it's actually technically the next part, or maybe it's no, it's part of this, but she has it's called the Happiness Project Journal, so it's associated with the book. It's got the same color scheme, so if you have the book, it looks the same, but it is a 5-year journal that's one sentence long. And so you are just supposed to write down one thing that really makes you happy, that really makes you grateful for that day. What's that little tiny memory that you would otherwise forget that's going to make you smile at the end of the day, right? And it's funny, I got this journal from one of my really good friends. She was one of my bridesmaids in my wedding. And she gave it to me right after my son died, of just a way to capture the little happy moments, right? That it wasn't all sad. It wasn't all doom and gloom. It wasn't all hopelessness and lost. There were still little things that did that. And because I've written this stuff down, because I've kept note of it and I go back and I look at it, right? Some of these memories that probably would have been lost to the fog of grief, to the fog of everyday life as we moved back into that, are captured and still bring me joy, still bring me happiness, in those little tiny things. And it's funny, I kind of did this naturally anyways. I have a notebook on my folder, or I have a notebook in my phone that's the same thing, that is just like when there's this little moment that I'm like, I just want to remember. Most of it is like things Austin says, but it's like, what are those little tiny things that I just want to capture, because it helps me feel grateful for the life that I live, for the, the moments that happen in my everyday life. So we'll get a link for Scott for the actual journal itself, but it's one sentence. It is lower the bar of entry here for this. It is, what is one little moment today that happened? And as you collect this stuff, you would be so surprised. And especially as you do a whole year and then you start on the next year, because then you're naturally reading the thing from the previous year. It just helps you with that. I am grateful for this life that I've lived. I am grateful for these little things that kind of are mundane, but really, really matter at the end of the day. They matter to what makes me happy and what brings me like a joy and smile to my face and that kind of a thing.
And it's not really about living in your past, but it's taking those past moments. And if you can segregate, if you will, the happy moments and dissipate the less happy moments, this is not magic. This is neuroscience. Those
Right.
happy moments will come to the front of your memory and to the front of your mind, which goes into your being. Because if everything starts in your mind as thoughts, which we know is true from science, then why not fill your mind with happy thoughts? And that's the purpose of this gratitude notebook and this concept. And in fact, if we're talking about things that bring the past into the present and into the future, one of the things that I've done for years with my team and for myself is we do something called a time capsule. So whether it's on their work anniversary, their birthday, or maybe if you're from the United States, we do it around the Thanksgiving holiday, where we take that moment and with intention, set aside the time to write down all the things that we're experiencing right then. Like, what are our fears? What are our hopes and dreams, our passions, our potential, our purpose, the things going on at work, the things that are making us happy, the things that are giving us angst. And then we put into the time capsule that this is a snapshot. And so what do we hope that next year, when we open the time capsule, the future me will get to see? And I can tell you, I have had so many conversations with people that once they open the time capsule the next year, it's a very meaningful and very powerful experience. And last year, when I opened mine, it hit me significantly because I actually was opening one that was with a person that I was coaching. And so that thing they wrote, what happens is you make an appointment with yourself for that future date the following year so that it shows up with what you wrote. I opened the time capsule, Sam, and I started to cry because not only was the post beautiful about what this person wanted for their future and the things they were dreaming about and the things they had accomplished and where they had come from, that they were so proud of themselves. But between that date and the date I opened the time capsule, the person passed away. And I read that and I thought, at least in those moments of her writing it, she had this hope for the future. I could have been sad and just thought, well, now she's gone. But what I was able to take with me from her time capsule was all of those things that I cherished about her. And now it has become a core memory, a conscious memory for me. And I think we talked about this last week, I think. But if you haven't seen the movie Inside Out or Inside Out 2 from Pixar, go see these films. They talk about how you do have some power to control the core memories that are within your mind. And it's just a beautiful way of thinking about how you can capture something beautiful. And so for gratitude, if you don't like journaling, have never tried journaling, it's not that hard to start with just a sentence.
The first time you had me do that, the next year, it was really great to see what my hopes had been for the future and to see how far I had come or how much things had changed. And it really did put a lot of like gratefulness in my heart of that. And yeah, it's such an easy thing to do. It is literally go out 1 year in the future, put a date, put a reminder on your calendar, but write in that reminder everything for this year. And then you just do that. And it's like, it's a good thing to do on holidays. It's a great thing to do maybe for your birthday, right? Just some kind of annual something for you or some day that means something. But it's such a great exercise. I would encourage anybody to do it because the reflection part of it is so powerful. And the being able to recognize an entire year's worth of growth and change in yourself is priceless and, and really interesting. So one of my favorites.
We talk a lot about the Passion Planner, and Scott, let's put a coupon code for the Passion Planner in our show notes for our friends. But the Passion Planner has a monthly journal. So now we've talked about you can have a daily 1-sentence journal. You can have a daily long diary. You can have this send yourself a note once a year. The Passion Planner has a monthly look back. So it asks things like, how are you different this month than you were from the month before? What are the things you're planning for the next month? Some practical things, but then it also says, what are you and who are you especially grateful for in this past month? And it will give you pause, because if you don't sit down and think about those things and you let the whole month go by and you have nothing to be grateful for and no one to be grateful toward, then there's something wrong there.
Right, right. That's something that you want to address, that you want to do something with, because that's how we end up waking up and we're like, how did 2 years pass me by? How did 6 months pass me by? And I think that anything you can do to mark time a little bit, right, in some kind of regular cadence for yourself helps you recenter and bring you back to kind of where you're, where you're at, and, and then things like that. But yeah, this is, she wraps this chapter up by talking about imitating a spiritual master. So she has a lot in this chapter, a lot in this section in this chapter about like, what do other people do? Like, right, we're giving you things you could imitate, but, really like taking anyone you consider a spiritual master. And that can be, it could be from a religious movement. Some of the examples that people gave were, just great thinkers, right? Just great writers, just great, people who have thrown information out there in the world for others to consume. And maybe for you, it's somebody you follow on TikTok, right? Like that's okay. But something that is someone who's really takes you into that like thoughtful, contemplative, outside of yourself, bigger space. But she found someone she really enjoyed and was trying to imitate what she really, respected about this person, what she liked about this person. And I just thought it was an interesting journey to like watch her talk about the person she had chosen and, go through that journey.
I think what I'll close with for today, Sam, for me is something that she wrote right at the end of this chapter. And when I think back to the way Mo Gaudat lived and the way that his son lived and the way that Dr. Sonia taught us and the way that James Clear outlined to elevate the best habits in your life, and absolutely the way John Wooden's father taught him, which what we're talking about, friends, is all of the podcasts we've had so far, is summed up in this chapter where she says that philosophers, scientists, saints, and charlatans all give instruction on how to be happy. But this doesn't matter to a person who doesn't want to be happy. If you don't believe you're happy, then you're not. As Publilius Cyrus, I'm not pronouncing that right, but something Mr. Cyrus observed, no man is happy who does not think himself so. If you think you are happy, then you are. That's why somebody named Therese says, I take care to appear happy and especially to be so. So if you are thinking about how this chapter lends itself into eternity and you think about what will people say about you when you're gone, what will your epitaph read? I want people to say that I didn't just pretend to be happy, or that I was never happy, or that I was on a quest for something elusive being happy that I never caught. I want people to say, I knew her as somebody who lived a life that was happy and joyful.
I love that. Right. And I think at the end of the day, that's truly what it all comes down to. I like anytime I talk to a client, anytime I talk to a family member, a friend, it all comes back to that's what we want. We want to be happy. And I love that quote that you did. I had that whole section highlighted too. And she says that I realized that the loving thing to do would have been to act happy, not only for myself, but for them, right? And for you to be happy, for you to pursue your own happiness is a way for you to care for others, right? To care for your impact in this world. Because if you can truly find happiness, other people around you can too. And it spreads, right? Like you can't be around a happy person and be really miserable, right? Like, you just can. And so if you can think of yourself as happy, like you're saying, right, with that quote of, I'm happy if I think I'm happy, right? And I can't be happy if I don't think I'm happy. Yeah. And to me, that's that is like, I think that the perspective she ends with is that's the gift to the world you can give, right? Like that can be your legacy. That can be the thing you spread. And like, that is a life well lived. I mean, that
Yeah.
would be a lovely epitaph.
I think so too. And next week, we're going to talk about one of the things that should make you happy, which is following your passions. So that'll be our chapter for next week. This has been great to be with you, Sam. I always feel happier when I talk with you, and learning about this book through your lens is such a cool, fun way for me, because I read the book by myself, but reading it with you and hearing how you have interpreted certain things, it elevates my happiness too. So thank you for that.
Same. And I would love to hear from other people too, right? Like one of my favorite things is when I get a text from somebody after they've listened to an episode and they're like, oh, here's my thought, or here's the thing that I did with this. So like, if you're listening, I mean, really, like Denise and I are just people, like just DM us on LinkedIn or whatever. Like there's our contact information in the show notes. Like we would love to hear from you. It would make me so happy to hear a story about your thoughts on this, about how this is, how this is going for you. Like that would be great. So please, please, please reach out to us. I would just love to hear that. It helps us learn. It helps us grow. Because I agree with you, Denise. I learned so much from your perspective and your thoughts and your stories on how this is getting integrated into your life.
Awesome. Well, friends, thank you for being here with us again. My name's Denise Russo, and on behalf of my friend Sam Powell, this has been another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.